Coming up in this episode of iCantCU, I'll tell you all about my travels to Washington, D.C. and podcast movement. You will not believe what Be My Eyes told me when I was searching for something. Stick with me.
From Studio B in Swarthmore, this is the iCantCU podcast with David. It's like blind people for dummies.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of iCantCU. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I really appreciate you joining me for this episode, and welcome inside Studio B. Jane is home, so you can see it's a better picture, got it lined up a little better, and very excited to talk about my trip to Washington and podcast movement. And as I mentioned in the last episode, I found out right before the convention started that I was going to be going because I wasn't going to go. And then they had this great deal on the hotel room. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to go. It only cost me the entry fee to the convention, which was $366, and my travel costs and any food that I ate while I was down there. So all in all, probably about $450, $500. So it wasn't horrible. And it was a great time. It's great to get to meet up with other podcasters. I was the only blind guy there. And I'm going to talk about the pressure of being blind at this event. And there's a lot of things that went on, but I didn't think things were going to get going because I had the night before I was going to leave. And when I say the night before, it was probably about 2 a.m. before I was going to leave. And I had uploaded the last episode and I had uploaded the last YouTube video. And right before I left, my train from Swarthmore into Philadelphia was to leave at 11:23. I had a few minutes. So at about 11, I said, let's see how many downloads we got on YouTube. And when I say we, I mean me, because nobody else was in that episode. So I log in and it says, your video has been pulled down. I click on more information button or whatever it was. And it said there were links to a spammy or unsafe website. I'm like, oh my God, what did I link to? What did I type in wrong? And then it shows me the link, iCantCU.com/269. That was the last episode. That was the link to the show notes over on the website. I'm like, what's wrong with my website? So I go to iCantCU.com. Big red, to me it was blue because I have the screen reversed. Security warning, you can't proceed, so forth and so on. I'm like, great. I now have about 12 minutes before my train is going to leave. And I said to Liz, I'm not going to make this train because I've got to find somebody to fix the site. I quickly found someone that had helped me in the past. And I'm sometimes wondering that this is the third time I've used this guy in the last, 15 to 18 months. So is he fixing it or is he fixing it and then breaking it so I have to pay him again? I'm hoping it's not that. I'm hoping it's not that because the guy is a very nice guy. Again, based somewhere over in Southeast Asia. I don't remember if it's Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, wherever. He does it a good job and he does it quickly. Quickly is a couple of days because of the time issue. It was 11, like a little after 11 here. So that means it's 1 o'clock in the morning there. So I sent him the information without sending him what website because I'm sure he does a million jobs over the course of time. So I had to get back to him, but the app isn't accessible. So the next night when I got a message from him saying, hey, could you tell me what website this is for? Even though I sent him the login info, that didn't help him because he didn't know where to go, to put that info. I texted Liz. So when she woke up the next morning and she gets up early, she sent him the information because I left the screen open on my computer in the living room. He takes care of that. But in all of everything that was going on before I left, I'm like, okay, let's try. I said, we have 8 minutes. So we jump in the car and Liz thought we had to leave our house at 11:23. And as we're there and she stopped at this stop sign and checking something, I don't remember if it was the radio, something else. I said, the train is due in at 11:23. And she said, oh, I thought that's what time we had to leave. I said, no, we got to be there by 11:23. As we're pulling at Swarthmore coming from South Chester Road towards the station, there's a roundabout. As we're pulling into the roundabout, Liz sees the train pulling in up ahead. It's another block ahead or so. I quickly jumped out of the car. Ziggy was going crazy. I didn't really get to say goodbye to him or Liz. I jumped out of the car, grabbed my bags. I didn't even unfold my cane. I was running to the train with the suitcase in my one hand and my cane in the other hand, but all folded up. Fortunately, I didn't run into anybody. Fortunately, I didn't run into anything. And I got on the train. I don't think I cut anybody off. I got on and I just started to sit down and the train started moving. I took a breath. I got my card out because usually you have to tap in at the station. Then they scan your card again on the train and then you scan out on the other side. Okay. I get to 30th Street Station and where SEPTA comes in and where Amtrak comes in, two separate sections. They're doing a beta test on, I forget what they called it, contactless travel. And I jumped in on that because I'd love to be able to not have to fumble through my wallet to get the card out. If I could just pick up my phone and open the wallet and then scan, bing, bang, boom, like you do with Apple Pay, I thought, man, that would be great. So I jumped on that. And the people who were at the gate said, oh, no, we don't take cards here now. I said, I know, but I'm trying for the beta program for the cashless entry or touch-free entry or whatever it's called. No, we don't do that yet. I said, I know, but I have to try to scan in and then tell them where I tried to scan in. Now, the problem is on the train, when I went to fill out the rest of the form, because it told me to do that, to do the scan in first, when I went to fill out the rest of the form, some of it wasn't accessible and I had to put in some information. With Apple Pay, each time you scan, it doesn't show your credit card number. It gives you a generic number that changes every time you use it. I'm not sure I'm going to get in on that. I hope I do because, again, I'd love to be able to not have to fumble through my wallet to take out the card because it's, my fingers don't work well. So it would be a lot easier to just pull my phone out. So we'll see how that goes. But I got there in plenty of time and I went over to the desk to find out where the train was leaving from, which platform I had to be on. And the gentleman at Amtrak said, oh, why don't you go over to the red cap and you can take the elevator down. And since I was carrying a suitcase or wheeling a suitcase, I thought that might be better. Only because when I go down on the escalator anywhere, everybody thinks that I can't walk downstairs. And I'll tell you a bit about that in a second, or go down an escalator. And when I'm carrying a bag, whether it's a shopping bag or a heavy suitcase, and it wasn't too heavy because I was only going for a few days, but I get a little nervous on either the stairs or the escalator. So I thought, you know what? I'll go to the red cap. I'll go down in the elevator. When I go over there, the guy says, oh, the train is delayed. I said, okay. Is it from the weather the previous night? Because I'd heard some issues coming from New York. In Newark, there was an issue from New York to Newark. And that seems to be a frequent occurrence. So I have plenty of time and I don't even remember what I did. I just kind of hung out at the station, texted with a few people and kind of went through the information on the podcast movement app. I get on the train, no problem. Lady helps me on and tells me where I could go. And I get one of the handicap seats. And the only reason I like to sit there as opposed to any of the other seats, I don't have to put my bag up. I'm always worried when my bag is up on top on that shelf that when I pull it down, I'm going to whack someone because I obviously won't know if somebody's walking as I'm trying to pull it down. So when I sit in the handicap section, there's a lot of leg room. I mean, a lot. I mean, I couldn't even stretch out to the other end. That's how much there is. So by sitting there, I could put my suitcase and my backpack in front of me, and then I know where it is all the time, and I can get to my backpack easily and so forth. So I got down to Washington, and I always seem to mess this up in Washington, and I always have trouble getting out of the station. But this time I followed a few people. There was a family. They sounded like they were English. I followed them because they were following someone else, and I ended up getting out of there very easily. I asked somebody, and I followed them all the way to, it looked like they were getting on a metro or something, and I didn't want to do that because I didn't know where that was going. I asked someone, I said, where's the taxi stand? And the guy told me, oh, just hang a right and go all the way down and it'll be on your left. And I spot on, I got down there, got in a cab, and probably took about a half an hour to 40 minutes to get to the hotel. We were about 15 miles south of Washington. It took that long because I got there, the train was late, and I was about an hour late getting to Washington, little more, little less. So we were sitting in rush hour traffic, basically, both in the city and then on the highway just out of the city after you get underneath the Potomac. And when we got to where the hotel was, it was so nice. It was along the river, and it was called National Harbor, I think. Not to be confused with Inner Harbor in Baltimore. National Harbor. You could see Virginia across the river. Even I could see, I couldn't really see what was there, but I could see after the water, so I could tell there was something there. The other thing that was kind of cool, but also not kind of cool, every minute to a minute and a half, a plane was flying in, and I'm guessing to come into Dulles, or I'm sorry, Reagan National. So I checked into the hotel, no problem. I walked in, and it's a very, again, because it's not in downtown Washington, it's very big, high ceilings, all marble type floors and tiles and whatnot. So very loud. And this guy, Chris, who works at the hotel, and I'm guessing he's a bellman, said, you looking to check in? And I said, yes. He said, all right, come on, follow me and I'll take you to the front desk. So I got to the front desk. He then helped me to the room and showed me where some of the light switches were. And it was very helpful. He guided me around up to the hotel, up to the room. It was great. And the one thing that I didn't know, because when we got on the elevator, I thought you could just find the floor number and hit it. Well, most elevators now in hotels, you've got to scan your card one way or another. So the next time I got into the elevator, it was me and another attendee, and she didn't realize that we had to scan. So we both got on the elevator and we're waiting, and she's trying to put her floor in and trying to put my floor in. She said, they're not lighting up. And I said, oh, is there a place do we have to scan? She said, oh, let me try that. And she's trying to scan and it wasn't working. And we end up going down a floor and somebody else got on, and he said, here, you got to do it. You probably have to do it while the doors are open. He did it, we pushed all our numbers, and we were good to go. Again, no trouble around the hotel once I got a feel for it. And one of the things that I like to do, especially when I have some time, and especially when it's not super busy, I like to just wander around, because then I could kind of figure what's where. This hotel called the Gaylord National Harbor had this great atrium. It was huge. In fact, I had a balcony that was on the atrium, so I could go and sit out there. It was like I was sitting outside, and I was on the 14th floor, which, that means the 13th floor. There was no 13. Now, I've been told by some people the 13th is usually a mechanical floor. If that's the case, maybe, but it went from 12 to 14 on the elevator. And I get it. You don't want guests getting off at the 13th. So I could sit outside, which I did, because the air conditioning in my room was just unbelievably Arctic. And no matter what I set it at, it stayed at 67. Chris even tried. I said, man, it's freezing in here. He said, all right, well, I set it to, I forget what he said, 76, 78, something like that, but it never got warm. So I finally had to just shut it off. And if it ever got too warm, I would turn the air on for a couple of minutes. Like when I got out of the shower every morning, I would turn it on just so the bathroom would cool off a little bit. So after I got done a little exploring, I thought, okay, let me go check in. I had until 6 o'clock or something. So I went downstairs. It said it's in the atrium. I went down there and I kind of walked around a little bit, and somebody saw me wandering, somebody from the conference, somebody that works there, and said, oh, are you looking to check in? I said, yes. And she said, do you have a regular pass, or do you have a plus or pro or whatever they're called? And I said, I have the plus. So, okay, come with me. And we went over, I checked in. Now, when I was checking in, the guy who was helping me said, okay, just push this on the screen. I said, I can't see the this on the screen. I said, so he spun the thing around. He touched it. I had to do one other thing, and then I had to sign. No problem. Got all my stuff. He said, you can go get a drink over there. And he pointed to his right, my left. And I didn't want anything. I was good at that point. And I kept going up to the concierge because I had to say, hey, where's this? Where's that? And he would tell me, just go up here and do this, or just go over there and do that. It worked out really well. And they were very helpful in the hotel. And folks were very helpful. other conference goers. And I'll get to that in a second. But after I checked in and checked into the conference and I took they give you a bag and there's some goodies in there and some other things, some literature. I took that up to the room. I didn't feel like carrying that around. Then I had some time and I was trying to figure out, am I going to eat something before the event that evening? And I thought, you know what, let me go outside and just see what's out there. So I went outside. It was a beautiful day out, a little warm. And there are a bunch of stairs, but not a whole staircase. It was 3 steps and then a big landing where you could take 5 or 6 steps and then 7 steps and then another big landing. And that led down to the river. And it was so nice out there. So I was warming up, standing out there and sitting out there. I mostly stood. And I walked along the Potomac for a little bit and went all the way down to where it ended and didn't see anything else. So I figured, you know what, the next day I'll go the other way. And I didn't really have a chance the next day to go the other way. So 2 days later, I went the other way. So August 19th, there was I don't remember what they called it. It was basically a networking event where you can go and get a drink and meet people. And I'm terrible at things like this because I can't see anybody and I don't know if somebody's approaching me. Fortunately, a lot of times people see me and come to me, which is great. And so that happened. This lady comes up to me and she said, "Hey, I'm Anne Marie. Who are you?" I said, and I showed her the badge and she said, "Hey, David, it's nice to meet you." She says, "I got to be honest. You looked around my age, so I thought I'd come over." And she was spot on. We're both born in 1964. So it was a good call by her. And she's telling me, we were talking about taking images. And I was saying, my daughter says that I take better pictures than my wife. And she says, it's funny. My wife is a photographer with this great camera, but when it comes to the iPhone, she can't take a picture for anything. And I said, that's very funny about that. And we talked for a while and then she went off and talked to some other folks and she told me she was from Nashville and so forth and so on. And then I thought, okay, I stood there for a few more minutes and kind of looked around, looked like I still had my cranberry juice in my hand and they didn't have iced tea. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to stay here just for an hour total and then I'm going to go up. Because if nobody else is coming over, then there's no point in just standing there. So I thought, okay, it's almost an hour. I put my glass down on a tray that collects glasses and I started to head out. And as I'm walking out, somebody texts me and I pulled to the side so I'm not blocking and I listened to the text and I don't remember what it was. And this lady comes over to me. Turns out her name is Minista Jazz. And we start talking. She's telling me how her mother is blind and we get into a conversation. And while we're talking, this other guy from Montreal, who's originally from Paris, comes over and he starts talking to me. And so we're talking for a while. And Jazz was telling me about an AI that she developed called Jerome. And right off the top of my head, I don't remember the number. I think it's 757-740-6868. But I will verify that. Check the show notes for Jerome AI. It's one that you can call on the phone and just start talking to it. Hey, who do you think I should pick first in my draft? Which I did on the way home on the train. It told me to pick Justin Jefferson if I had the first pick. I didn't have the first pick and I didn't take Justin Jefferson. He was long gone. So I talked to those two folks and the French guy left and I don't remember his name. And Jasmine said, I'm doing a presentation to Wednesday at 3 if you want to come over. And I actually went to it because it was about AI. It was about AI in DEI. That's a lot of letters. It was an interesting talk. AI, there were two things that were big at this conference, AI and video. And they're both things that I love. And of course, it all had to do with podcasting as well. But for the rest of that night, it ended up, instead of being there an hour, I ended up being there about an hour and a half, hour 45. I went back. At this point, I was tired. And I went back up to the hotel room and I called it a day. But after I talked to Liz and I talked to Jane, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go through my phone, go through the app, which is great that all these conferences have apps because then you can see where you want to be, what you want to hear, and you could kind of mark them off. So you can just pull up the schedule and say, oh, here's where I got to go for the next time. That's always a concern to me when it tells me to go to this room or to that room. I don't know where those rooms are. I don't know where those places are. And I'll get to that. Let me just backtrack for a second. When I was walking down the stairs to go to the river, two things happened. I went down the first or second set of stairs, and this couple comes up to me and says, "Oh, do you need some help going down the stairs?" Now, I got to be honest with you. The girl sounded like she was drunk. I don't know about the guy because he didn't really speak too much, but she said, "Do you need some help going down?" I said, "No, I should be okay." The other thing was when I got to the bottom, I hung a right, like I said, and I walked all the way down to where I couldn't go anymore. And then I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't pay attention to where I have to go back up those stairs. And I quickly started trying to remember what was around me, what I heard, what I smelled, whatever, and things that I could see. And there were a couple of things. I remembered there were these weird type flags on, I guess they were light poles. I don't think they were just flag poles. They were long. They seemed long and narrow, almost like a sail. And there were 3 to 5 of them. I don't know how many, but they made an unusual flapping sound in the breeze. I also remembered a little bit further down after I had walked a little bit, I remembered a big puddle. And as I was walking back, I got close to that puddle. I'm like, oh yeah, here's that puddle. I know I'm close. And I had texted my friend Harriet because we had been texting a little earlier. I had texted her. I said, how do you remember where you were to get back to where you were when you go for a walk or something like that? And I told her the story, what had happened. And I said, hopefully I'll find my way back up the stairs. So I got back to where I could hear the flags and I knew that I was close. So then I knew it was going to be on my left. I just started using my cane and tapping around and I found the stairs and I was good to go. I was very happy that I found that. So that was it for that day. The next day I knew that the keynote started at 8:30. I knew I wanted to get tea. I always bring protein bars. I eat these PB Crunch kind protein bars that I absolutely love. And I usually get a hot tea. Now, fortunately, in the atrium, besides some restaurants, there was I don't know what you would call it, a fast food store, or not fast food, I don't want to say like a Panera because it wasn't a cafeteria. You could get chips and stuff in there too, but you also they had Starbucks licensed drinks. So I'm looking around to see where I ordered the drinks from. So I went to the cash register. I said, yeah, I want to order a hot tea. Do I order it here and pick it up behind you? Because that's where all the lattes and stuff were being picked up out in the seating area. And she said, oh no, the tea is behind you to your left and you get everything on your own. I said, oh, okay. Do you need my help? I said, well, you know what? Let me try and do it on my own first because it's a good story for my podcast. And now you're going to hear it. So I pay I think it was $3.98. I can't remember if it was $3.98 or $4.98 for a large tea. So that would be a venti, I guess, brewed tea. And where I need to go is this corner area. And for folks in the Philly area, similar to Wawa, they have all those different coffee stations. I don't know how they do tea there because I've never gone in on my own and gotten it. But basically, they have a couple of machines that have the brewed coffees, and then they have one that has hot water. And then they have this big, I like to call it fixin' station, if you're familiar with Roy Rogers, where you can get the tea and the sugar and the honey and the stirrers and the napkins and whatnot. So first challenge was to find the tea. And I said, okay, well, how am I going to do that? Am I going to FaceTime somebody? I said, no, I want to do it on my own. I don't know why I want to be so independent. So I see and I feel something that feels like, I know it was boxes of teas because I saw this apparatus that it seemed like it had 6 or 8 teas on it, 4 and 4. And I felt the front and they had the little opening where you can pull the tea bags out. The tea bags are wrapped, not to worry that people are touching all the different teas. So I took a picture of that, took it into Be My Eyes, went into the AI portion of that, and it told me what the things were. But here was the most interesting thing of all of it. It didn't tell me where each one was. It said kind of where they were. It said on the top row is this, 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 and this, and on the bottom row is this, 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 and this. I then asked, where is the English breakfast tea? It's in the red box on the lower group of teas. And I said, interesting. If I'm totally blind, I don't know which box is red. And I thought it surprised me. And I thought it was funny. But I could tell all the other teas were very light colored, like oranges and yellows. There might have been a light green. The red one stood out. Even I could tell the red one. So I grabbed it. And of course, to verify, I pulled a tea bag out. I took a picture of it and I had it read it to me to see what it was. And it was the English breakfast. I grabbed 2 more tea bags because I put 3 in. I need the caffeine, believe me. And in this place, I needed the heat of the tea. I'm using Seeing AI now to find where the hot water might be. And I started all the way down on the one end where I told you the brewed coffees were. And I just came along and then I hear hot water. And I said, okay, great. Now I have to find the cups. And the cups, I noticed there was a thing right next to each of the the spouts for the different things. And I feel the small cup, I feel the big cup, and that's what I wanted. But I wanted 2 big cups so I don't burn my hands. So I grab the cups. I then feel something to my left under where the hot water is. And I know that they're the coffee collars. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong camera. Not that I could see either of them, but I grabbed the coffee collar and I put that on because once I opened the tea bags and I put the tea bags in the empty cup, because I like to put the water on top of the tea, not wait and fill the cup and put the tea bags in. I want the water to hit that tea from the minute it goes into the cup. I know, weird, right? Once the cup is what I deem to be full enough, I then tuck the paper part of the tea bags into the coffee collar so they don't fall in and I can easily find them. Now, one other thing that I do, and I may have mentioned this in the past, whenever I have any kind of hot tea or any kind of tea, and I'm using more than one tea bag, I will hold the paper part of the tea at the one end of the string and then spin the bags in a clockwise motion so they wrap around each other. And I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. So they wrap around each other. And then I only have to worry about pulling one thing out because in the past, when I didn't do that, I would end up grabbing only 2. Again, my sense of feeling isn't great, so I can't tell if I've got 2 pieces of paper in my hand or 3. So this way, I know if I grab one, I've grabbed them all. And then, like I said, I tuck it into the coffee collar and then I take it back over to the fixins bar and wait to let it steep. I let it steep for 5 minutes, usually a little less, and take the tea bags out, cover it up, and head up to the conference for the keynotes. I actually may have waited a bit at the tables in front. They had tables that they had chairs at, but at the ends they didn't have chairs, so I could stand with the tea right in front of me. And I actually stood there for a few minutes, now that I think about it, with the lid off to have it cool down a little bit. So when I get upstairs to the icebox that was the keynote ballroom, I would be able to drink it and not have to wait more. And where I sat the first day was right where the cold air was blowing. It was horrible. And I had shorts and a t-shirt on. I was really regretting that I didn't bring the hoodie down with me. Sat through those keynotes. And as I'm getting up after the keynotes that were done, and the keynotes were great. Ira Glass was one of the keynotes from NPR. And they were just all the people that they had do the keynotes, except one segment. They were all great. There was one that wasn't great. And the same thing goes for all the presentations that I saw, all the sessions that I attended, all were great. One was, I still don't know what it was about. And it really had nothing to do with what the title of the thing was and what they were supposed to tell us. The first day, the issue was finding the stages because the exhibit hall, which was huge and loud because it's a hard cement floor, and it's a super high ceiling. The stages were in sections of the exhibit hall. Now, there were a couple of stages that were offset, so were a little bit quieter. But what the cool thing was, each stage you went to, you got a set of headphones that were only for that stage. So when you put the headphones on, you could hear no problem. It's when you tried to listen without the headphones, you really couldn't hear. You could if you had dog hearing, and you could hear some of it, but it was just drowned out by all the noise in the exhibit hall. This woman who was helping me, she said, "Oh, how are you going to get to the different sessions? I said, I don't know. I said, once I get down there, I'll get my bearings. And so she said, well, I'll help you get to the first one. And what's the first one? And I told her, and I knew we had to go to emerging trends, which again, it was going to be either video or AI. And I don't remember what it was because I went to probably about 15 different sessions to 20 different sessions while I was there. And sometimes I would go to one and it would end and I would try to catch the end of another one. And so I did that a few times as well. But I get to the one and she leaves me, this woman, and she said, how are you going to get to the other? I said, I'll figure it out. I always do. And I don't think she believed me. She was on the older side. I don't think she was as old as me, but she was on the older side too. And I realized as I'm standing there without the headphones, because she didn't mention the headphones, I saw somebody wearing headphones. I'm like, oh, I wonder where they got those. And I wandered around and then I heard somebody say, oh, let's go get some headphones. And I wandered over there and I got the headphones. I put them on. I'm like, wow, this is great. And I stood for the whole thing and it was awesome. It was nice because they had seating set up facing the stage and a video screen, but they also had some tables at the back that you could stand at, the standing height tables, or if you had a chair, it would be a high top basically. And so most of the times I stood, and when I didn't stand, sometimes I was so tired, I'd start to doze off because because there's something wrong with me. But the woman came back after the sessions were over and she said, I found 3 of the 5 stages, and she proceeded to tell me where they were. And we actually then walked to the 3 that she knew about, and we spotted a 4th, but there were still 2 others that we couldn't find. And I figured when it's time for me to get to one of those, I'll figure out where it is. And sure enough, I don't know if it was that day or the next day, I was handing in my headset and I said, do you know where the such and such stage is? And the lady told me, yeah, you go down. It's all the way at the other end, but it's not against the back wall. You've got to go off the back wall and you'll see it. It's the next row of, for lack of a better word, booths. It was bigger than most of the booths, though. It was a smaller setting than the ones along the back wall and the ones in the 2 offset places, but it was still there. And again, you had the headphones so you could hear. I wandered around the exhibit hall for a little bit, and that's hard. So I have my phone out holding with Seeing AI open, and I'm just walking. And I walked with it this way and held it to my right. To my left. And as I'm walking by, I'm hearing what's there. And then I would walk down the other way, or I'd switch this way, holding it in my left hand, but it facing my right ear while I'm still sweeping with my cane. And what's funny is, now that I think about it, because I guess I was the only blind person there, I only almost ran into a couple of people. And most of the times it was their fault because they were looking at their phone and not paying attention. I was usually walking fairly straight, because I can't really tell how straight and how usual. But it was so nice to be there and to hear all these different things that I'm so interested in learning about, as well as meeting some folks. I saw someone that I had met at PodFest back in Orlando in 2020, right before everything shut down, literally right before. It was March of 2020 that I was in Orlando and for PodFest. And so I got to talk to Alex Sanfilippo. And again, I knew if I was going to speak to this guy, I would have to go and wait after his session was done. And when his session was done, I knew the stairs were to the left of the stage. So I went to the left of the stage. I walked up front and waited in a line of a few people who had questions for him about his presentation. And I went up to him and we talked for a few minutes, and it was nice to reconnect with him. He was very kind to me down at PodFest. I was sitting at a table and the people who were sitting with me had gotten up, and I guess I was sitting by myself. So he came over and he started talking to me, and we talked for quite a while, probably a half an hour, 45 minutes down there in Orlando back in March of 2020. And it was really nice. And I will never forget. I don't remember too much of what we spoke about other than talking about our podcasts and the different things. As time went on in the exhibit hall, I got more comfortable. Now, one thing I noticed that when I had a minute, somebody had suggested I go to the Libsyn booth because it was their 20th anniversary and they were giving some great things away. So first thing the next morning, I thought, let me go to the Libsyn booth. I go to the Libsyn booth and I ended up talking to a guy who is doing, it might have been the very first presentation that I was at the day before. And I think his name was Steve or Steven. And I talked to him and we were talking a little bit and he said, oh yeah. I said, I had a couple of questions for him. One of the sessions told me a lot of places now accept video when you upload your podcast. Spotify for one, Apple for another. And I asked him, do I upload it all on Libsyn, which is my media host, or do I then, once I upload the podcast episode, do I then go to the various places, Spotify or Apple or whatnot, and then put them up? And he said, you're better off doing that because you'll run out of space very quickly because the videos, of course, are huge. I think the video from my last episode was over 14 gigs. And I don't remember what kind of space I have per month from Libsyn, but it's not that much because they're usually small MP3 files when I upload them and when they go to the feed, the RSS feed. So I talked to him and I said, hey, I hear you have some nice swag. What do you got? And he said, well, I have pens. And I'm thinking, blind man doesn't need a pen. They did have a stylus on the other end of the pen, though. He said, oh, we have these cookies. I said, oh, wow, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. The night before, I bought a cookie from the cafe, whatever you want to call it, downstairs, along with a tea. And it was good. It was a chocolate chip cookie that was great. So I got this Libsyn cookie. I think I have a picture of it. If I still have the picture, I'll put it up. Had their logo on it and everything. Was baked by some place in LA and brought with them to the hotel for the conference. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, that first day between my site being hacked and rushing to get to the train and not having to rush because I could have taken the later train because the Amtrak train was delayed, just one of those days when I was checking in at the hotel, I am handing over my information, my ID and my credit card. Some alarm starts going off. And I said, is that a fire alarm? And she said, yes. And the lady says, who's helping me, she said, we're not going anywhere until I finish this. I said, that's the words I wanted to hear. So she checked me in and it turned out to be, I don't know what, but the place never caught fire as far as I could tell. When I was back up in my room after I had gone up there, the alarm went off again and it said all clear, safe to return. I said, okay, great. Well, I'm glad I didn't leave. So on that second day, one of the confusing things was that the stages' names had changed. It was still the emerging trend stage, and that one still had the same sponsor, but some of the others had different sponsors. So the one that I knew as the Quill stage was now called something else. And so that made it confusing. But again, I was still able to find them because at this point I knew where all the stages were. Now, I knew after a couple of sessions, I wanted to go to Descript. And I'm an affiliate for that. I'll put an affiliate link in the show notes. But I use Descript for a lot of things. It's recording this episode right now as we speak. I use it will put out a transcript of the episode, which I then copy and I take to ChatGPT and I ask it to summarize the episode, which I then use for the show notes. But one of the things that I didn't know it did, and I've been trying to do it using CapCut, which is how I edit the video, it will create clips automatically. And I thought, I'm going to try that, but I can't see, not saying anything strange here, right? I can't see the different things. I know that the third one down was to take out the filler words. So when I say, it will highlight it. When I click that button, it will highlight it and I can go up to a menu that I can take out all the filler words. And sometimes they're just me saying the same word twice in a row. They're just something like that. It will highlight one of the justs and then I could click a button and poof, it's gone. So ums and ahs, which I just used this for White Canes Connect, episode 109 that just came out, there were about 300 ums and ahs, or uhs, in that episode. So I edited it like normal because there were 4 people on it. So I don't know how it would come out because a couple of people were making noise. One person was on a computer using the computer mic and speakers. So there was all sorts of other noises. When they put their hands down on their desk, you could hear it, things like that. So it's never ideal to use your computer speaker and microphone to do an episode. So I had to edit that because I had to take those things out. And because we edit on individual tracks, I can do that unless the noise that happens is from the same person who's speaking. But once I finished that editing, I took it into Descript and I found a way to easily get rid of all the ums and ahs. I don't want to necessarily get rid of the other things because I don't know. I don't want to get rid of the word just if it's needed somewhere else. Or, that's another word that will get flagged. And me just saying it there, it will be flagged. Because sometimes it's a filler word and sometimes it's somebody asking a rhetorical question. That is important. Sometimes it's just a filler. But once I found that I could see all the ums and ahs and just click a button to tag those two and then hit apply and poof, they're gone, it is 2 minutes. So that's great. But that's not what I wanted to speak to Descript about. I wanted to find out how to make the clips. What's the keyboard shortcut? Because the keyboard shortcut for me, for anything, is what I need. And especially when you're using a screen reader, you need to use the keyboard shortcuts because you can't use a mouse because you're just dragging a mouse around. Now, on this computer here in Studio B, my Mac Mini, when I hover over something, it will tell me what I'm hovering over, which is very cool. So that when I hover over the file button, I then know I can drag my mouse up and down that and hear the different options that I have under that menu. And so I went over to the desk, I went over to the booth, I should say, and I said to the person who helped me, and I think he might have been one of the ones presenting. I don't remember, but he was very cool. And he tells me, okay, I believe you can do Command K and that will pull up the spotlight so you can just type in, I forget what you call it, clips, something like that, whatever it's called. And it will automatically pull that up. Once you type that in, it'll be the only thing that'll come up there. I was so excited that I wanted to try it then and there, but I don't travel with the computer. I'm certainly not going to try. I don't have any kind of way of doing it on my phone as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure there's a way. But I will try that for this episode and we'll see. And I also will try it for episode 109 of White Canes Connect, which is about how Simone Cooper and her blind social club won $5,000 for her club, for her group that started out just going to different restaurants. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But after I talked to get to Descript, I didn't know where they were. And I knew where the Libsyn booth was. So I pulled out my phone and I went into the app to the exhibitor section. This was a long way to get to this. I get to the exhibitor section and I can see that it has logos. I can't tell what the logos are. I can see that it has a button down the end. And as I drag my finger down to that button, it says select. Well, I don't know what I'm selecting, so I don't want to just click that for everything because I don't know how many exhibitors there are there. So I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to find Descript? So to find Descript, I first had to go to the section. I knew where Libsyn was, so I had to go to Libsyn. So I typed in Libsyn and did a search. And then I took a screenshot of that page. I then took the screenshot into Be My Eyes, had it described to me. I don't think it told me what booth number they were. So I then asked, what does it say, what booth number they're at? And it tells me 304. I said, okay, great. I get rid of that picture. I go back to the app for podcast movement. So I type in DES and two things come up, Black Magic Design and Descript. I go and I take the screenshot. I go into Be My Eyes. I ask it to read it to me. Well, I ask what it is. It says getting the description. It then tells me, maybe because the last time I asked what booth number Libsyn was, it tells me what booth number it was. I didn't have to ask the question. And it tells me, I don't remember what it was, 116 or 114. I'm thinking, okay, well, Libsyn was in the 300 section, and that was right when you walked in the exhibit hall door. So I knew I had to go back, and so I went past Libsyn, and I crossed over the next cross aisle, and I knew that had to be the 200s, and then I go over the next cross aisle, and I knew now I'm in the 100s, and I just started walking around, and of course, I went to the right first, and that was wrong. So I walked all the way down, and they were all the way down near 2 of the stages. So it was a good placement because they were near 2 of the stages. But I found it, and I asked the guy, hey, what do I do? And I told you what he told me. I have to hit Command K and type in what I want, and boom. I'm interested to see how it does for the clips, because what the clips could be useful for, not just with this podcast, but with White Canes Connect, it will give content for either the White Canes Connect Instagram feed or the NFBFPA Instagram feed. It would just make things a lot easier and not a lot of work to get some content out to get people to start using the different socials, Instagram for White Canes or Instagram for NFBFPA, or my Instagram for that matter. If I'm doing a clip for this end of the White Canes, I'll put up there as well. So I'm really excited to try that out. Like I said, I haven't tried it yet because, of course, when I came back, I had 8 million things going on because I was away for 4 days. It was just hard to get back into the groove because this person needed something on Tuesday and I didn't come back until late Thursday. Oh, and the other thing was, I had mentioned earlier, on the way home, I thought, well, I have my All Blind League fantasy draft that night. I better look a little and see how I want to situate my guys and so forth and so on. So, of course, I had the 9th pick in the first round. The one I should have picked was A.J. Brown. Now, I've told you a million times, whoever I pick in the first round has a terrible year, or worse, has an injury that is usually career-threatening. So I didn't want to do that to A.J. Brown because he's playing for the Eagles and I want to see the Eagles win. So I picked someone else, and I picked Jonathan Taylor. Wasn't my top choice. He was the next one on my list, so I picked him. For better or for worse, that's who I got. I got a C+ draft grade from Yahoo. But also on my way home, I had mentioned Jerome AI. So again, I'll have the link in the show notes, and it's kind of cool because it's like you're talking to someone. Hey, how are you? Who is this? And one thing about the panel that Jazz sat on about AI and DEI that they are worried about, and I noticed this in something that I was doing just a couple days ago, it doesn't always give an answer for, or it may exclude a certain group. And I don't remember what I was searching for, but it was exactly what they were talking about. And this panel, as far as I know, I believe they were all Black. And they don't want to be excluded from results. And I know this was an issue with blind folks. Mark Riccobono down at the convention in Orlando had talked about issues with AI and talking about blind folks in general. So it was interesting to hear that, but this Jerome AI was very cool. So give it a try. The link is in the show notes. Again, Minister Jazz is her name, Minister Jasmine. I don't know what she's a minister of, but she's got an event coming up in Baltimore in October. And I had mentioned someone who I know who has a business in Baltimore that his name is Kevin Cross. He has a thing called the Essential Cane Keeper for canes that fold up. It's kind of like a quiver for arrows, except it's for your cane, and you could hook it onto your belt. So you're not, I constantly throw mine under the table. When I sit down at a table, I fold it up and throw it underneath. If there's a base on the chair, sometimes I can put it behind me and have it rest on that base. But for the most part, it's on the floor, which I don't like to go start feeling around the floor for something if I had the case on me. And I do have one, I just can't find it. And they may have given it to someone. So that event might be something for him to get involved with, and I'll have to get some more information from her about it. But it was interesting to talk to Jerome and ask about the draft picks. It said that if I had the first pick, like I said, Justin Jefferson, I said, what if I have the 6th pick? It said Saquon Barkley would be a good choice. Like I said, I had the 8th pick. Saquon Barkley, I don't think was still there. And again, not that I would pick him because he's on the Eagles, and I'm not going to do that, both to the team and to him, because I've always liked him since he was at Penn State. So I have Jonathan Taylor. So we'll see how that goes. I do have Marvin Harrison Jr. in both teams, both the All Blind League and the Keeper League that I'm in. So that's pretty cool. I do have a couple of carryovers. Now I'm also supposed to join another group, another fantasy football league that is a fundraiser for the National Association of Blind Students. I paid my money. I'm just waiting to hear about the draft and what's coming up and so forth. I haven't heard anything. I just paid yesterday. But the main thing my main takeaway from Podcast Movement was the pressure that I felt being blind. Everybody was waiting for me to run into something, to fall downstairs, to do something that would have been either embarrassing or worse, hurtful in a physical sort of way. And so every time I went to the stairs, because unless I was carrying a cup of tea, I always took the stairs. And the atrium was down probably about 30 stairs from the lobby level. So until I found that the elevator actually went to that level from my room, I was going down to the lobby and then walking down the stairs. So I was so careful because I didn't want, there was this one blind guy at the conference and he ran into this wall. He tripped over a planter. He went into the bushes. He did something. I didn't want to be that guy. So I just felt this pressure because sometimes people would say, hey, do you need help doing that? And I would say no. And I've told you in the past that when people come up to me and say, hey, can I give you a hand? Do you need some help? And I say no, it just makes me feel 100 times more pressure than I actually would have because I've got to do it right. Because if I mess up after somebody's offered to help me, I told you I would have helped you, the person's thinking. So there was just a tremendous amount of pressure not to mess up. And it used to be that I would get nervous if I were going to be on video or something. And now I just don't feel that. I don't even, and maybe there's something else wrong with me. Jane had some things going on the other day. She says, I feel like a can of soda that's been shaken, but not opened yet. I said, okay, so butterflies. I haven't felt that. And I'm wondering if there's something wrong that, and I felt that is there something wrong when I get on a train or go to the airport or to try to find a luggage or find my way in? I just don't worry about it like I used to. I don't know if I'm getting more confident, if I'm getting more confidence, whatever it is. I figure it out. I know that I'm going to figure it out. And I tell people like that woman who said, how are you going to get to the next event? I said, I'll figure it out. And if I can, I'll ask someone. Now, I do have to ask some people from time to time that I maybe wouldn't have done in the past, but I want to do it on my own and to show other blind folks, and they're obviously not going to see me doing this, but these people who see me out on my own say, hey, that guy made it down here. I had mentioned walking along the river. The first night I walked down the one way, so down the stairs and to the right to the end. The third night, my last night, I walked down and to the left. So when I went to the left and I sat in the sun for a while and I talked to Jane on the phone, and congratulations to her. She had an interview that day for a new position at a new agency, which she learned the next day that she got. She's now going to be the communications manager at the new agency she's going to, and she starts in a couple of weeks. But after I finished talking to her, I walked further to the left and there wasn't much down there. So I got to a chain link fence and I turned around. I said, I'm going to walk all the way to the other end again. And when I got to the other end, and if you look at my Instagram, you'll see there is a picture of me in front of a Ferris wheel in one of my most recent posts. That was the end of going that way. And I noticed while I was standing there that there was a car parked and I assumed it was a parking lot. As I'm standing there looking and listening to an email, or a text, I guess I should say, I noticed another car driving and I thought, I wonder if that's a road and not a parking lot. So I walked up there and sure enough, it turns out it's a road. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to walk back to the hotel this way. I know how basically I have to go. So I walked, and every few feet, I took my phone out, waved it around, and had Seeing AI tell me what signs it was reading. I walked just a little bit further and I see this thing and I'm like, what does that say? And I pull my phone out and it says Bucks. I said, wait a minute, Starbucks? And I moved my phone higher. Sign was a vertical sign and it says Starbucks. I'm like, yes, I wanted an iced tea. There wasn't a place. The iced tea at the cafe in the hotel that I'm in only had bottled teas, which were okay, but I'd rather have the fresh made. So I go in there and I get the Trenta, which was, they actually made wrong the first time, and I got it and I was so happy and excited. So the next day when I woke up, I thought, I'm not going to have that protein bar for breakfast. I'm going to see if I can make it to the Starbucks, get one of their breakfast sandwiches, the turkey, bacon, egg white sandwich, which I love, and only have about 200 calories, 210 calories. So I get that and I get my hot tea and I eat the sandwich there and I bring the tea back with me. So I was pressed for time. I ate my sandwich and I'm going to take my tea back with me. And I didn't want to go back along the street because there's all sorts of jut outs and poles and posts. And I thought, let me just walk back along the river because it's a pretty smooth sailing. At a couple spots, there's little pole barriers to stop trucks or cars from driving down further on it. And so I walk back that way and I shoot some video along the river, which you can see here if you're watching on YouTube. And it was just such a nice area. When I got back to the hotel, I thought, I don't know if I have enough time to check out. And then I realized that after the keynote that ended at 10, I didn't have something until 11. So I knew I could come back up to the room, check out, let them keep my bags, and then go back into the exhibit hall, which is what I did. I had plenty of time to do that, check the room. I may have left something there, but what can you do? Too late now, right? I finished up and I was so excited that I was able to find that because then on the train on the way home, like I said, I ate the protein bar. So all was good. It was a good trip. I got into Philadelphia a little earlier, so I was able to catch an earlier train back to Swarthmore and have a little bit of time to both eat and relax before my draft that night. So all in all, it was a good trip. And whenever I go any place, especially on my own without any kind of assistance, unless somebody that I say, hey, excuse me, could you tell me where the blank is? Or can you point me in the direction? And I mean that as a figure of speech, because if you point me in a direction, I will never find it. But you know what I mean. All in all, it was great for that. I learned so much that I'm ready, and either tonight or tomorrow, I will book my ticket to PodFest, which this year is in the middle of January. And I haven't gone in the last few years because it's been right at the end of January. And it ends the day before Washington seminar begins. So I'd be away for about a week or a little bit more than a week. And I don't want to do that. It's too close together. So the fact that they had to switch it this year to mid-January, I think it's the 16th. So I'll be back in Orlando on the 16th of January and looking forward to that because it's a very different conference than Podcast Movement. Podcast Movement is, I don't want to say corporate, but there were folks there from ABC News and CNBC. Like I mentioned, NPR had a booth and sponsored one of the stages, had a lot of folks there, more business oriented, not independent oriented, which PodFest, it seems to be more independent, more community based, which is something that I really loved. I had a great time when I was there 4 years ago. A lot of folks were very, very helpful, and I almost didn't go, but Chris Kremitzos, who is the person who started it, said, we'll make sure you have somebody to help you. And I made friends with people beforehand. There were Zoom events, so a lot of folks got to meet online before going, so it made it a lot easier. So that's in the middle of January. Now, I mentioned episode 109 of White Canes Connect, and this is a great story. Simone Cooper, who is a chapter member of the Greater Philly chapter of the NFB of Pennsylvania and part of the Philly Meetup for the Blind, she has this, I don't know if you would call it an organization, this group, or I guess we could call it club, because it's called the Blind Social Club. And she talked to us. She just won a $5,000 award to help out going to a winery and orchard in September. So that enabled her to give a break on the price to the folks in the club so they could go because they've got to rent a bus and so forth and so on. So we talked to her and we talked to Katie Sampson, who was on the committee that nominated and chose her as one of the recipients. And it's just a great story. I've mentioned a million times, it's so important for blind folks to get out and about. I used to complain before COVID, I used to be the shut-in, not because of COVID because where we lived in media wasn't close to any kind of public transport. It was very difficult to get to places. When we moved to the condo in 2016, it was a little easier. There were shops I could go to. I could go to the drugstore and pick up my meds, and it's right around the corner from where I am now. So again, same thing here. I could walk to the train station if I needed to get into town in a hurry and not wanting to take an Uber if it was a nice day out. Seems like I walk there less and less now because I've always got something else going on, or it's a miserable weather day, or I'm carrying a suitcase, which I don't want to drag a mile on uneven sidewalks to the station. But it's in a good spot now. But it's so important for blind folks to get out and be social, because when you're shut in, you just start to, you become nothing. You're just watching TV and not doing anything if you're not working. If you're working, it's a different story. You have those connections. But a lot of folks don't have those. So over 70% of blind Americans are out of work or underemployed. So it's just important to get out. And she created this before COVID and ramped it back up after COVID. So congratulations to Simone. It was a great interview. So check it out. Episode 109. There's a link in the show notes. It's available on YouTube as a static image with @PA Blind Podcast. So check it out, Apple and Spotify and just about any place else that you use to get your podcast. You can find it there. White Canes Connect. We're up to episode 109. But that'll do it for episode 270. Can you believe it? I had a new logo for 4 or 5 episodes now, and I haven't brought it out. That's one thing on my agenda, among many things on the agenda to do, is to create new cover art for the episode, for the podcast, and start to use that new logo everywhere. I do appreciate you listening to this episode or watching this. If you're watching on YouTube @iCantCU over on YouTube, please like it and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, questions, comments, whatever you got. Please tell me something down below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Show notes are available over on the website. Fingers crossed that it's still up and running. That's another one on my list, is to migrate that site over to a new host so it's more stable and doesn't keep getting all crazy on me. And my email's a little more stable and everything else. iCantCU.com/270. That's iCantCU.com/270, numerically speaking. And remember, iCantCU sounds like a whole sentence, but it's only 7 characters long. iCantCU.com/270. Reach out to me via email, iCantCUpodcast@gmail.com. That's iCantCUpodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, show ideas, whatever you've got, please shoot me an email or give me a call, 646-926-6350. You've got up to 3 minutes. Please leave your name and your town if you do leave a voicemail. Questions, comments, show ideas, tips, tricks, questions about Washington, questions about podcast movement, anything you've got. I'd love to hear from you. Again, 646-926-6350. Again, I really appreciate you listening to and watching this episode of iCantCU. Be well, stay safe, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the iCantCU podcast with David. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends.